What if I told you that one of the most feared aircraft of World War II was a Frankenstein's monster of spare parts? It was designed without grace but quickly became a silent killer in the most unforgiving theater of war. Welcome to Historical Digs. We uncover the story behind the Bristol Beaufighter, a machine crude enough to be overlooked but too devastating to forget. From bomber scraps to brutish brawler. In the desperate days of late 1930s Britain, the Royal Air Force desperately needed a heavy fighter, something with enough punch to swat down bombers and hold its own against agile interceptors. But time was short, resources scarcer, and traditional design cycles were a luxury they couldn't afford. Enter the Bristol Aeroplane Company, already busy churning out Beaufort bombers. Their solution? An audacious gamble. Take the Beaufort's wings, tail, and undercarriage and graft them onto a brand new, heavily armed fuselage. It was less a design, more a reassembly, a shortcut born of necessity. And thus the Bristol Beaufighter was born. Initially christened the Type 156, early iterations were hardly a picture of elegance. It was bulky with a squat, almost pugnacious appearance. Power came from two Bristol Hercules radial engines, each churning out over 1,400 horsepower. But the true innovation, or perhaps desperation, lay in its firepower. Packed into its nose were four 20mm Hispano cannons, a devastating battery capable of unleashing a torrent of explosive shells. Add to that 6 .303 caliber machine guns in the wings, and you had a flying arsenal. This wasn't a precision instrument, it was a blunt force object designed to inflict maximum damage. Early trials were predictably fraught with teething problems. The sheer weight of armament, coupled with the improvised airframe, led to stability issues and a general lack of refinement. Some pilots joked it flew like an anvil, heavy and unrefined. Yet beneath its awkward exterior lay a dormant potential, a raw power waiting for the right crucible. Initially conceived as a long-range fighter to protect convoys over the Atlantic, the Beaufighter, in its early iterations, struggled to find its niche. It was too heavy for agile dogfights against single-engine fighters, and its radar systems, though revolutionary for night fighting, were temperamental. But here's the twist: the very characteristics that made it cumbersome in European skies, its rugged construction, formidable armament, and impressive range, would make it unexpectedly lethal in a theater few had yet considered. The Pacific, with its vast distances, brutal climates, and unique tactical demands, was about to offer the Beau a second, far more infamous life. Whispers in the Canopy. When the Beaufighter arrived in the Pacific, it wasn't met with fanfare. Rather, it was a pragmatic solution to a desperate and evolving conflict. Allied forces were locked in a brutal struggle against a tenacious enemy in an environment unlike any they have previously encountered. The sheer vastness of the ocean, the oppressive humidity, and the dense triple canopy jungles presented unique operational challenges that conventional aircraft struggled to overcome. Traditional air superiority fighters often lacked the necessary range and payload for the immense distances involved, while larger bombers, though capable of carrying heavy ordnance, proved too vulnerable on the precise low-level attack runs demanded by the theater. The Beaufighter, despite its unglamorous origins and initial design compromises, possessed a unique and surprisingly advantageous combination of attributes that would prove perfectly suited to this savage new battleground. Its sturdy airframe, initially a practical consequence of its cobbled-together design utilizing Beaufort components, unexpectedly proved remarkably resilient to the stresses of intense low-level combat and the unforgiving tropical conditions. The twin Bristol Hercules engines, while indeed powerful at altitude, had a distinctive deep thrum. When combined with rapid low-level approaches, often skimming just above the waves or through dense foliage, this contributed to a reduced acoustic profile that caught many by surprise. This earned it a chilling nickname among Allied troops, Whispering Death. Allied reports claim Japanese forces had little warning before the Beaufighter's devastating attacks. This wasn't merely propaganda, it was a terrifying, tangible reality for those on the receiving end of a Beaufighter strike. But the true genius of the Beaufighter's specific transformation lay not just in its inherent characteristics, but in its shrewd and aggressive adoption by the Royal Australian Air Force, or RAAF squadrons. These pilots, fighting vigorously to defend their home territories and push back the Japanese advance, possessed an intimate understanding of the brutal realities of jungle and maritime warfare. Their mission wasn't about high-altitude dogfights or strategic bombing. It was about precision hunting in the labyrinthine trees, skimming mere feet above the water, or navigating treacherous narrow ravines to find and destroy enemy assets. The RAAF adeptly adapted the Beaufighter, refining its role and transforming it into the ultimate ground attack and anti-shipping platform. They meticulously stripped out any unnecessary weight to enhance performance, operated the Hercules engines at settings optimized for low-altitude strike missions, and crucially, developed aggressive, almost suicidal tactical approaches that fully exploited the Beaufighter's formidable firepower and surprising turn of speed at low levels. This wasn't merely a change of operational scenery for the aircraft, it was a complete and radical reinvention of its purpose and methodology, driven by the ingenuity, courage, and sheer grit of the Australian air crews who flew it into legend. Their pioneering tactics and relentless pursuit of the enemy cemented the Beaufighter's fearsome reputation and earned it a place as one of the most effective and dreaded aircraft in the Pacific theater. The Jungle Hunter's Tactics. The Beaufighter's strategy in the Pacific was disarmingly simple, profoundly brutal, and terrifyingly effective, surprise the enemy, and deliver overwhelming firepower. Royal Australian Air Force squadrons, particularly the formidable No. 22, No. 30, and No. 31 squadrons, meticulously perfected tactics that leveraged every one of the aircraft's unique characteristics. Their primary targets were not just static installations, but Japanese shipping convoys, critical supply lines winding through treacherous terrain, and troop concentrations camouflaged deep within the labyrinthine jungle. These were not the high-altitude bombing runs seen in other theaters, they were screaming, eye-level assaults that left virtually no margin for error or evasion for either the attacker or the defender. Pilots would initiate their approaches at wave-top height, often skimming mere feet above the Pacific swells, or skillfully weave through the dense, multi-layered jungle canopy. This terrain masking was crucial for avoiding early detection, allowing them to close the distance on their unsuspecting targets. The powerful Bristol Hercules engines, while robust and reliable, would often be throttled back during these critical approach phases to reduce their profile and surprise their targets, contributing to the aircraft's eerie reputation. The moment the target was sighted, frequently at alarmingly close range, the Beaufighter would unleash its devastating array of 4 20mm Hispano cannons mounted in the nose and 6.303 machine guns in the wings. The concentrated burst of explosive shells from the cannons could rip apart patrol boats, shred trucks, and even demolish concrete fortifications with shocking efficiency, turning targets into instant wreckage. For larger, more resilient targets such as destroyers or vital merchant ships, the Beaufighter also carried torpedoes, often executing perilous single-pass attacks that demanded immense pilot skill and unwavering courage. Launching a torpedo at high speed from such low altitude, frequently under a hail of desperate anti-aircraft fire, was an extraordinarily dangerous endeavor, yet one that RAAF crews mastered with chilling precision and devastating results. One particularly infamous and psychologically impactful tactic developed by these squadrons was the strafe and run. Beaufighters would sweep over Japanese airfields or encampments with their guns blazing, then immediately execute a sharp turn and disappear back into the obscuring jungle or over the horizon before the enemy could effectively organize a response. Allied reports suggested these tactics left Japanese forces constantly on edge, vulnerable to sudden chaos. The sheer speed of these low-level passes, often exceeding 300 miles per hour, coupled with the Beaufighter's inherently robust construction that could absorb considerable battle damage and still return to base, made it an incredibly difficult aircraft to counter. It wasn't just a fighter or a bomber, it was a flying battering ram, a surgical instrument of destruction perfectly adapted to the close quarters, brutal, and unforgiving nature of the Pacific War. Heroism amidst headaches. Despite its undeniable combat prowess, the Beaufighter was, to its core, a mechanical maverick, a testament to its origins as a hastily assembled war machine. Pilots and ground crews often had a love-hate relationship with the aircraft. While its firepower and ruggedness were universally lauded, its maintenance demands were considerable, especially in the harsh, humid conditions of the Pacific. While generally reliable, the Hercules engines in tropical conditions were prone to oil leaks and overheating on the ground, demands that tested even the most experienced mechanics. Then there was the sheer awkwardness of its design for ground crews. Accessing certain components for repair was notoriously difficult, requiring contortionist-level feats and cramped engine nacelles and fuselage sections. Spare parts, particularly in isolated forward airfields, were often scarce, forcing ingenious field repairs. Mechanics sometimes resorted to salvaging parts from downed or irreparable aircraft, turning each Beaufighter into a unique patchwork of components. The hydraulic systems, critical for landing gear and flaps, were prone to leaks and failures, occasionally leading to exciting, unscheduled belly landings. Some crews preemptively reinforced landing gear with additional checks after hard landings. It was a constant battle against corrosion, fatigue, and the sheer wear and tear of low-altitude, high-stress combat. Yet it was precisely this blend of brutish reliability in combat and finicky maintenance requirements that cemented the Beaufighter's legend. It was a machine that demanded respect both from its enemies and from the dedicated crews who kept it flying. The men who flew and maintained the Whispering Death didn't romanticize it, they understood its flaws, yet they also saw its unparalleled effectiveness. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't easy, but in the chaos of the Pacific, it delivered. It was a machine that mirrored the grit and determination of the Australian airmen who flew it, a testament to the fact that sometimes the most effective weapon isn't the most beautiful, but the one that simply gets the job done, no matter how much complaining it takes to keep it in the air. So what do you think? Was the Beaufighter's unlikely success a triumph of improvisation, or did its sheer brutal effectiveness in the Pacific define its true purpose? Let us know your take in the comments below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell to join us on the next historical dig. Until then, remember, history is full of hidden gems if you know where to dig.